Have you ever noticed that some people seem to carry a kind of invisible armor? No matter who criticizes them, tries to humiliate them, manipulate them, or provoke a reaction, they simply remain firm. While most people lose sleep over a single phrase, these people continue living as if nothing happened. The big question is, were they born this way? Or did they discover something that almost no one else knows? The truth is, you were taught to defend yourself the wrong way. You were told you needed to respond in kind, prove you were right, earn everyone's respect, constantly demonstrate your worth, and never let an offense go unpunished. It sounds like good advice, but that's exactly what keeps thousands of people emotionally trapped for life. The more someone needs to prove their worth to others, the more power they give to those they want to defeat. Machiavelli understood this like few others. His vision of politics, guided by reality, not ideals, showed that true power never comes from collective approval, but from the ability to remain unshaken when the world tries to decide who you should be. And here's the part that usually bothers me. Maybe the person who hurts you the most today isn't even the main problem. Maybe the real problem is the space they occupy in your mind. After all, an offense only continues to hurt when it finds a place to stay. A manipulator only continues to control when they discover which emotion they can arouse. An abuser only persists because they realize there's still a reaction to exploit. That's exactly why so many intelligent people remain trapped in toxic relationships, abusive environments, and endless conflicts. They believe they are fighting against people when, in reality, they are fighting against psychological mechanisms they never learned to identify. Throughout this video, you will discover principles that have spanned centuries and remain frighteningly relevant. You will understand why some criticisms hurt so much, while others simply cannot find a place in the mind. You will learn how to eliminate the fear of rejection, how to prevent emotional manipulation from working, why most people willingly surrender their peace, and how to develop a posture that makes it almost impossible for anyone to control your decisions. You will realize that concepts such as virtu and fortuna, calculated use of force, appearance of virtue, decisions based on real human nature, and constant adaptability do not belong only to history books. They can completely transform the way you face any conflict in modern life. But there is an important warning. Some of the ideas you will hear here will contradict everything you have been taught about self-esteem, kindness, forgiveness, and emotional strength. At various points, you may feel like disagreeing, and that's a great sign, because the greatest transformations almost always begin when a comfortable belief clashes with an uncomfortable truth. So, stay until the end. The last lesson is probably the hardest to accept, but it may also be the one that will ensure no one can ever use their emotions against you again. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. There is a silent trap that ensnares intelligent people for years, and almost no one realizes they've fallen into it until it's too late. It begins the moment someone unknowingly surrenders control of their own self-worth to the opinions of others. From that moment on, each compliment acts as a temporary dose of happiness, while each criticism feels like a direct blow to their identity. Machiavelli understood that this was one of the biggest mistakes of those who wished to gain any kind of power. After all, those who depend on the approval of others never act with true freedom. Instead of making decisions based on real human nature, they begin to mold their personality to please different audiences. Today, they smile because they were praised. Tomorrow, they despair because they were ignored. Then they change their minds simply to avoid conflict, and little by little, they cease to know who they really are. This is precisely why politics guided by reality, not by ideals, begins within one's own mind. Before understanding the world, it is necessary to understand who is truly holding the reins of their own emotions. Observe how this happens in practice. A person publishes a project, starts a business, creates a channel, or simply expresses an opinion. For a few minutes they feel proud of their own courage. Then 2 negative comments appear. Curiously, hundreds of compliments cease to matter, while those few criticisms begin to occupy all the space in their consciousness. The brain starts repeating those words for hours, sometimes for days. At that moment, the problem was never the comment itself. The real problem was allowing a stranger to be authorized to define how much that person is worth. Machiavelli would never advise anyone to build their identity on such unstable ground. When he wrote about, "It is better to be feared than loved," he was not advocating gratuitous cruelty, but warning that depending exclusively on the acceptance of others makes any leader vulnerable. Those who live trying to please everyone inevitably end up displeasing themselves, and those who constantly seek external recognition rarely develop their own virtù and fortuna because they spend more time reacting than building. There's a simple yet profoundly transformative exercise. Whenever someone offers praise or criticism, the first question shouldn't be, "Is that true?" but rather, "Why has that opinion gained so much traction within me?" This brief pause completely changes the game. Gradually, the person realizes that their peace was never stolen by others, but voluntarily given by themselves. A new way of walking through life then emerges, acting because it makes sense, not because it will be approved. This posture strengthens a kind of invisible armor, built on the appearance of virtue, emotional discipline, and the calculated use of force, not against others, but against one's own internal weaknesses. Just as generals prefer to trust their own loyal armies rather than mercenaries, those who desire stability learn to trust their own conscience more than the judgment of the masses. And when this independence begins to take root, an inevitable question arises between the lines. If no one else can control your worth, will anything still be able to threaten your peace? It is precisely this shift in perspective that paves the way for understanding one of the most powerful psychological laws regarding fear and freedom: emotional asymmetry. There is a principle that separates emotionally free people from those who constantly live under pressure. And curiously, it seems to contradict everything most people have learned about positive thinking. While many believe that strength lies in imagining only good outcomes, the most efficient strategists train for the exact opposite. They fearlessly face the worst possible scenario. Machiavelli understood that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, requires abandoning comfortable fantasies and observing the world as it really works. Those who accept only pleasant possibilities become slaves to the unexpected. Those who mentally contemplate possible losses drastically reduce the power they exert over their minds. This does not mean living pessimistically, but preparing the consciousness to remain stable even when circumstances change. This is a profound manifestation of constant adaptability, because the person ceases to depend on a single outcome to continue moving forward. The less fear manages to surprise them, the less influence it has on each important decision. Imagine someone about to have a job interview, launch a company, declare their feelings, or start a major project. Most people spend days trying to convince themselves that everything will work out. However, as soon as an unexpected obstacle arises, all that confidence disappears. The strategist does things differently. Even before the first step, they ask themselves, what if I don't succeed? What really happens next? They discover that they can look for another opportunity, adjust the plan, acquire new skills, or simply try again. Gradually, they realize that their life doesn't end because of a failure. On the contrary, they continue moving forward. It is precisely there that an almost uncomfortable freedom is born for those observing from the outside. Fear loses fuel because there is no longer an unknown future feeding the anxiety. Machiavelli would call this acting according to decisions based on real human nature, understanding that suffering is usually much greater in the imagination than in concrete events. Those who understand this learn that the end justifies the means only when those means preserve lucidity in the face of difficulties, never when they are driven by despair. This attitude completely transforms how someone faces criticism, rejection, and loss. When a person has internally accepted that they can be rejected, lose money, hear no, or even fail in front of others, no one can use these possibilities as a form of manipulation anymore. It's like taking all the ammunition out of the hands of those who intended to intimidate them. A silent confidence then emerges, very different from the arrogance displayed by those who need to prove their courage all the time. This strength is born from the combination of virtù and fortuna, because inner preparation begins to walk alongside external opportunities. This is also why better to be feared than loved can be interpreted on a psychological level as becoming someone impossible to control emotionally. Those who do not fear loss cease to be easily led. Those who have made peace with the worst-case scenario begin to walk serenely, even in the face of the greatest uncertainties. But there is an even deeper detail that few realize. Accepting risks is not enough if one's own identity remains vulnerable. At some point, it will be necessary to separate who the person really is from the image they present to the world. That's exactly where the next step in this silent strategy begins. Few people realize they carry an invisible problem throughout their lives. They confuse who they really are with the persona they present to the world. When someone criticizes their work, their appearance, their ideas, or their performance, that criticism penetrates all layers of their personality and directly affects their identity. The result is predictable: pain, anger, shame, or a desperate need to prove something. Machiavelli observed that any leader needed to master the appearance of virtue, not as a form of gratuitous falsehood, but as a strategic tool to survive in a world governed by perceptions. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, teaches precisely this. The world reacts much more to the image it sees than to the essence that remains hidden. Those who understand this principle begin to separate two figures within themselves. There is the authentic human being with their values, fears, and dreams, but there is also the avatar, the public identity that negotiates, works, leads, creates content, faces conflicts, and navigates competitive environments. When these two dimensions cease to be confused, an emotional stability is born that few manage to develop. Think of successful business leaders, surgeons, judges, pilots, or military commanders. None of them bring all their personal emotions into the moment when they need to make a decision. This doesn't mean they've stopped feeling fear, sadness, or insecurity. It simply means they've learned to adopt a specific role when the situation demands clarity. An entrepreneur might be worried about household bills, but in front of their team, they project direction and confidence. A doctor might be dealing with family problems, but during surgery, their attention is entirely focused on the patient. Similarly, Those who produce content, lead people, or face criticism online need to understand that attacks almost always target the public figure, not necessarily the person behind it. Machiavelli would call this acting according to virtù and fortuna, because true competence lies not in eliminating emotions, but in preventing them from taking control of the strategy. It is precisely this mastery that allows for the calculated use of force, choosing when to demonstrate sensitivity and when to maintain absolute silence. Even the principle of better to be feared than loved takes on another dimension. It's not about intimidating people, but about preventing them from discovering their emotional vulnerabilities. There is an extremely effective exercise for developing this separation. Before entering an important meeting, recording a video, negotiating a contract, or facing a difficult conversation, a person can ask themselves, who is entering this situation? My emotional self or my strategic avatar? This simple mental shift drastically reduces the tendency to react impulsively. Gradually, they learn that their true value remains protected, regardless of the outcome of that specific interaction. Just as ancient kings protected their territories using their own loyal armies, the mind begins to protect its essence through discipline and decisions based on real human nature, instead of depending on the emotions of the moment. A curious freedom then emerges. Criticism ceases to seem like personal attacks. Praise ceases to inflate the ego, and each situation is analyzed with much more balance. But there is an even more subtle prison hidden behind this evolution. Even those who master their own identity remain vulnerable while harboring expectations about what they would like people to be. And it is precisely this silent hope that needs to be confronted in the next step of the journey. There is a huge difference between living without hope and ceasing to depend on it. At first glance, this statement seems pessimistic, almost cruel. After all, from a young age, people learned that hope is synonymous with strength. But Machiavelli observed human behavior from another angle. He understood that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, requires abandoning the expectation that the world will cooperate simply because someone has good intentions. Expecting everyone to be just, loyal, or consistent creates an invisible vulnerability. It is not reality that destroys peace, but the distance between what happens and what was expected to happen. When someone stops placing their emotional stability in promises, fantasies, or improbable changes, they begin to act with much more precision. This does not mean abandoning dreams or goals. It means removing from them the responsibility for one's own happiness. This posture represents a powerful form of constant adaptability because the person learns to build strategies for any scenario, and not just for the scenario they would like to live in. It is precisely there that a serenity is born that often seems inexplicable to those who remain trapped by expectations. Consider how many conflicts arise simply because someone expected another person to change. They expected a friend to be more grateful. They expected a partner to be more loyal. They expected a boss to finally recognize their effort. They expected family members to understand their choices. Years pass, and hope continues to function like an emotional debt that is never repaid. The strategist makes the opposite move. They accept that people will act according to their own interests, their fears, their limitations, and their worldview. This doesn't make them cold or bitter. It simply prevents them from building castles on unstable ground. Machiavelli would call this making decisions based on real human nature, because understanding how people normally act is much more useful than insisting on imagining how they should act. That's why the end justifies the means, when correctly interpreted, doesn't authorize any attitude, but teaches that the path needs to be built on concrete facts, not on desires. Someone who wants to start a business, for example, doesn't plan relying solely on perfect clients. They create financial reserves, diversify suppliers, and study competitors. Those who wish to strengthen relationships also learn to trust, but without abandoning discernment. This difference completely changes the way one faces life. When hope ceases to occupy the center of the mind, something curious happens. Fear diminishes because disappointment loses much of its power. If someone stays, great. If someone leaves, the structure remains standing. If one opportunity disappears, another can be built. This independence gives rise to a calm, firm presence that is difficult to manipulate. It is a natural consequence of the union between virtù and fortuna, as the person begins to trust more in their own adaptability than in the goodwill of circumstances. They also understand that the true appearance of virtue does not consist in appearing optimistic all the time, but in demonstrating balance even when everything seems uncertain. Just as ancient rulers preferred to trust in their own loyal armies rather than the promises of occasional allies, those who seek psychological sovereignty learn to trust more in their own preparation than in expectations of others. Gradually, the need to control people disappears because the illusion that they will act according to our wishes no longer exists. However, a crucial challenge remains: understanding that many toxic behaviors were never personal attacks. They follow patterns that are far more predictable than they appear, and recognizing this completely changes how you react. One of the greatest psychological liberations occurs when someone realizes that not everything revolves around them. It seems like a simple statement, but few people live according to it. Just encountering a rude person, an envious colleague, a manipulative family member, or an aggressive stranger online is enough for the mind to immediately conclude, "They did this because of me." However, most of the time the reality is very different. Machiavelli understood that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, requires observing human behavior without romanticism. Wounded people often wound others. Insecure people frequently attack those who inspire confidence. Frustrated people seek to release their tension on any available target. This happens regardless of who is in front of them. Just as no one takes a storm personally, it also makes no sense to interpret every display of hostility as a judgment on one's own worth. This change of perspective completely alters the way conflicts are viewed, because it replaces emotional reaction with strategic observation. It is a direct application of decisions based on real human nature instead of impulsive interpretations fueled by ego. Imagine standing in line and encountering a grumpy attendant who responds curtly. Most people spend the rest of the day thinking about that situation, trying to figure out what they did wrong. But did they really do anything wrong? Perhaps that employee had an argument at home before leaving for work. Maybe they're facing financial problems, sleepless nights, or immense pressure in the workplace. The same happens with offensive comments on social media. How many times does someone write cruel words simply because they're trying to alleviate their own frustration? The strategist learns to see these behaviors like someone observing a weather forecast. If it starts to rain, nobody's offended by the clouds. They just open an umbrella or wait for the storm to pass. Machiavelli would probably see this attitude as a manifestation of virtù and fortuna, because it preserves energy for moments that truly demand action. Instead of spending hours trying to convince unbalanced people that they are wrong, it concentrates its efforts where there is a real possibility of growth. After all, better to be feared than loved also means not allowing any provocation to determine your emotional state. Those who react to everything end up being led by everyone. This perspective profoundly transforms how someone faces difficult environments. Instead of asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" the person begins to ask, "What does this behavior reveal about the person practicing it?" This single question reduces unnecessary conflict and strengthens a much more mature stance. The calculated use of force often includes the conscious decision not to waste emotional energy where it will never produce results. A silent form of power then emerges. The aggression of others ceases to invade the inner space because it no longer finds open doors. Just as intelligent rulers protected their kingdoms with their own loyal armies, the mind learns to protect its peace by filtering what deserves attention. The true appearance of virtue ceases to be the need to appear strong all the time and becomes the ability to remain serene in the face of turbulence. This serenity, however, still needs to pass a decisive test, because understanding the origin of toxic behavior is only half the battle. The other half consists of responding to these situations with such controlled coldness that the aggressor simply ceases to find any foothold to continue the confrontation. There is a moment when any emotional strategy is put to the test, the exact instant someone tries to provoke a reaction. Few realize that much of human manipulation depends less on the words spoken and much more on the response they manage to elicit. A provocateur rarely seeks only to offend. The true objective is to make the other person lose control, say something impulsively, make a hasty decision, or reveal a weakness that can be exploited later. Machiavelli deeply understood this mechanism because he knew the logic of power. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, teaches that whoever controls their own emotions continues to steer the game, while whoever reacts impulsively hands the steering wheel to the opponent. It is precisely from this understanding that the so-called Borgia Protocol is born, a posture of absolute strategic coldness in which emotion exists but is never allowed to command actions. This is not a technique to appear cold. It is a method to prevent others from turning your emotions into tools against you. The less predictable your reaction, the less capable anyone will be of manipulating you. Imagine a corporate environment. A colleague makes a provocative comment during a meeting, expecting the other person to respond aggressively in front of everyone. If this happens, the discussion shifts from content to emotional outburst. The provocateur achieved exactly what they wanted. Now imagine the opposite scene. The criticism is heard in silence. The expression remains serene. The response comes only seconds later, objective, short, and completely devoid of irritation. The atmosphere changes immediately. The one who tried to provoke begins to lose confidence because they expected emotional resistance and found only stability. It is precisely at this point that Machiavelli demonstrated his understanding of human nature. The principle of better to be feared than loved can also be understood as becoming someone impossible to unbalance. There is no spectacle, there are no desperate justifications, there is no need to win arguments to protect the ego. Only decisions based on real human nature, guided by the calculated use of force. In many cases, the most powerful response is not a brilliant phrase, but the complete absence of impulsive reaction. Silence, when strategically chosen, often speaks volumes more than any speech. Developing this posture requires daily training. Before responding to any offensive message, before returning criticism, before arguing at home or at work, it's worth creating a small ritual. Take a pause, breathe slowly, and ask yourself if the next action is being chosen by intelligence or by wounded emotion. This simple interruption creates space for reason to take over again. Gradually, the person realizes that they don't need to respond immediately to everything, nor constantly prove that they are right. True strength is born when one's own peace ceases to depend on the behavior of others. This is a clear manifestation of the union between virtù and fortuna, because inner preparation finds the right opportunities to act with precision. Just as ancient sovereigns trusted in their own loyal armies to protect their territories, those who seek psychological sovereignty learn to trust in their own emotional discipline instead of the impulses of the moment. The appearance of virtue ceases to be a mask and begins to reflect genuine self-control. However, there is a tool even more disconcerting than remaining silent. In certain situations, the most powerful strategy is not to deny an accusation, but to agree with it so calmly that the aggressor completely loses the script they had prepared. Few psychological strategies cause as much discomfort to a manipulative person as removing the conflict they expected to encounter. Most verbal attacks don't stem from a desire to discover the truth, but from the expectation of provoking an emotional reaction. The aggressor imagines they will find justifications, endless arguments, desperate attempts to clean up their own image, or outbursts of anger. When this happens, they feel they remain in control of the situation. Machiavelli understood that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires seeing beyond words and identifying the hidden intention behind them. In many cases, responding point by point only strengthens the person who initiated the conflict, because it demonstrates that they managed to hit exactly where they wanted. The strategic mirror works completely differently. Instead of offering immediate resistance, the person calmly absorbs part of the accusation, without irony, without despair, and without the need to win the argument. This behavior completely breaks the emotional dynamic of the confrontation because it eliminates the fuel that sustained the attack from the beginning. Imagine someone saying in a provocative tone, "You think you know everything." The common reaction would be to immediately deny it, list arguments, justify behaviors, and start a long argument. The strategist can simply respond, "It's possible that sometimes I really do give that impression," or "Perhaps there's some truth to that." Instantly, the tension decreases, not because the accusation has been accepted as absolute truth, but because the aggressor has lost the opportunity to turn the conversation into a duel of egos. This principle appears repeatedly when observing great negotiators, experienced leaders, and emotionally mature people. They understand that not every battle is worth fighting. Machiavelli knew that better to be feared than loved also involves conveying the image of someone who cannot be easily swayed by provocations. Those who need to defend every detail of their reputation live emotionally at the mercy of any critic. Those who possess enough confidence to admit small flaws demonstrate a strength that is much more difficult to confront. This represents the true calculated use of force, saving energy on useless conflicts to use it only where it truly makes a difference. Applying this strategy requires a disciplined ego. It's not about accepting destructive lies or remaining silent in the face of serious injustices. It's about understanding that many accusations exist only to cause emotional distress. When this becomes clear, the person stops responding to protect their vanity and begins to act according to decisions based on real human nature. Gradually, they realize that admitting an imperfection does not diminish their authority. On the contrary, it makes their stance more solid and harder to attack. This stability is born from the union of virtù and fortuna, because only someone who is internally prepared can relinquish the constant need to appear perfect. The appearance of virtue ceases to be a performance and begins to reflect a silent confidence, built on facts, not on external approval. Just as ancient rulers preserved their kingdoms by relying on their own loyal armies, those who achieve emotional maturity learn to base their identity on internal principles, not on the shifting opinions of the masses. But there is a price that almost no one mentions when talking about this freedom. The more emotionally independent someone becomes, the less understood they tend to be by those who are still trapped by the need for validation. It is precisely this invisible cost that reveals the final stage of true psychological sovereignty. There's a truth that almost no one likes to admit. Every form of freedom comes at a price. Financial freedom demands years of discipline. Physical freedom requires constant care for the body. And emotional freedom, perhaps the rarest of all, requires accepting a very specific kind of solitude. It's not about living isolated from the world, but about understanding that, as one ceases to depend on the approval of others, many relationships inevitably change. Machiavelli understood that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, never promised permanent comfort. It promised clarity, and clarity often alienates those who prefer to live in illusions. When a person stops accepting manipulation, abandons the need to justify every choice, and learns to make decisions based on real human nature, some will interpret this transformation as coldness, arrogance, or detachment. In truth, what has changed is merely the inability of others to control someone who has finally learned where their responsibility ends and where the responsibility of others begins. This change often frightens those who have always benefited from the old version of that person. It's common to notice this at different stages of life. Someone decides to set boundaries and suddenly is called selfish. A professional starts saying no to abusive demands and soon hears that they've lost their humility. A person stops pursuing one-sided friendships and immediately accusations arise that they've changed too much. The curious thing is that often these criticisms don't appear because the person has worsened, but because they've stopped occupying the role that was convenient for others. Machiavelli saw this phenomenon as an inevitable part of human relationships. The principle of better to be feared than loved can be understood here as the willingness to give up popularity when it demands the sacrifice of one's own dignity. True virtù and fortuna are born when someone prefers to lose certain company rather than lose self-respect. It's also an expression of the calculated use of force, because not every battle consists of confronting people. Some consist of enduring the discomfort of walking for a time with less applause, less validation, and less company. Paradoxically, it is precisely during this period that more authentic relationships emerge, because only those who respect who the person truly is remain, and not who they were forced to appear to be. Ultimately, psychological sovereignty doesn't mean becoming cold, indifferent, or incapable of love. It simply means that love ceases to be dependence, kindness ceases to be submission, and compassion ceases to demand self-sacrifice. The appearance of virtue ceases to be an effort to please and begins to reflect a coherence built daily. Just as ancient sovereigns protected their kingdoms with their own loyal armies, those who achieve true stability learn to protect their own minds through solid principles, discipline, and constant adaptability. There is no longer a need to win every argument, convince everyone, or respond to every provocation. Peace becomes more valuable than approval. Silence is worth more than the last word. Clarity is worth more than illusion, and when this transformation finally happens, the individual discovers that no one granted them power. They simply recovered what always belonged to them, but which for a long time had been unknowingly handed over to others. If you've made it this far, you've probably already realized that this video was never just about Machiavelli. It was about recovering something that many people have lost without even noticing: control of their own minds. Most people spend years trying to change the behavior of others, hoping for respect, understanding, recognition, or justice. But those who truly achieve sovereignty understand that the only battle that can be won every day happens within themselves. When you stop valuing others' opinions, learn to act according to a policy guided by reality, not ideals. Strengthen your virtue and fortune, practice the calculated use of force, and make decisions based on real human nature. No provocation has the same effect as before. The world remains exactly the same, but you no longer react in the same way. And this change completely alters how people see and treat you. Now, let's reflect honestly. How many decisions in your life are still made out of fear of rejection? How many times have you stayed in a relationship, a job, or a friendship just to avoid upsetting someone? How many nights have you lost reliving criticisms from people who may not even remember what they said? And the most important question of all, if no one could define your worth from tomorrow onward, what would you do completely differently? Think about this honestly. Because perhaps the freedom you seek lies not in changing circumstances, but in abandoning the need for them to approve of who you are. True strength never makes a sound. It doesn't need to win every argument, answer every provocation, or convince everyone. It appears when there is self-control, where there was once impulse, clarity, where there was once confusion, and serenity, where there was once fear. This is the true appearance of virtue, a tranquility born of discipline, sustained by its own loyal armies within its own conscience, and strengthened by constant adaptability in the face of any scenario. Those who reach this state cease to live, reacting to the world, and finally begin to lead their own lives. Now I want to hear from you. What was the most impactful lesson from this video? In what situation in your life do you realize that you still give too much power to the opinions of others? Which of these principles do you plan to put into practice today? Write your answer in the comments. I read many of them, and it may be your reflection that helps someone else awaken to this change. If this video gave you a new perspective, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss future content about Machiavelli, strategy, psychology, power, human behavior, and personal development. With each new video, you'll have access to knowledge that can transform the way you see the world, and most importantly, the way you lead your own life.